While most children were waiting for their Christmas presents, Emily was waiting in a hospital room, knowing her heart was slowly giving out. Yet every morning, she smiled, prayed, and asked one simple question. Who needs joy today? What you're about to watch is a true Christmas reminder that even the weakest hearts can carry the strongest love. Wherever you're watching from in the world, may this Christmas bring healing to your home, light to your spirit, and hope to places you thought were forgotten. Tell us in the comments which country you're watching from, because this message of love deserves to reach every corner of the world. Now, let me tell you Emily's story. Emily was only 8 years old but had already spent more Christmases in hospital rooms than at home. Outside her window, Christmas lights flickered across the city streets. Red and green reflections danced on the glass, blinking like tiny stars. Inside her room, a heart monitor hummed softly, steady, careful, tired. Emily watched the lights more than the machines. She liked to imagine they were blinking just for her. The children's ward smelled like antiseptic and pine-scented air freshener. Someone had tried to make it festive. Paper snowflakes taped to the walls. A plastic Christmas tree in the hallway, decorated with mismatched ornaments. Soft carols played quietly from a speaker near the nurse's station. Silent night, holy night. Some parents smiled when they walked past the decorations. Others looked away. Because Christmas in a hospital didn't feel like Christmas at all. Emily's heart had been weak since she was a baby. Doctors used words like congenital and complex. Words her mother, Grace, learned to understand, even when she didn't want to. Emily knew her heart was different. She just didn't think it made her broken. My heart just gets tired faster, she once said. Like when you run too long. Grace smiled at that explanation. Then she cried later, when alone. Emily had been in the hospital for many days now. So many that mornings and nights blurred into one long stretch of waiting. Waiting for test results. Waiting for doctors to whisper outside the door. Waiting for hope, or answers no one wanted to hear. Grace slept in a chair beside the bed, wrapped in a thin blanket. She woke up every time Emily shifted. Every time the monitor beeped differently. Every time fear crept too close. Emily was always a sweet and different child. She was never angry. She wasn't bitter. And she wasn't drowning in sadness like everyone expected her to. Instead, she noticed other people. She noticed the little boy across the hall who cried every night because he missed home. She noticed the nurse who always smiled but wiped her eyes in the break room. She noticed the elderly man who stared at the ceiling like he was counting regrets. And one morning, Emily asked her mother a question that stopped her cold. "Mommy, can we help them feel better?" Grace blinked. "Help who, sweetheart?" Emily gestured weakly toward the hallway. "Everyone." That afternoon, Grace wheeled Emily out of her room. Emily was bundled in a red cardigan with tiny snowflakes stitched into the sleeves. A nurse had given it to her early. "Because Christmas comes early for brave girls," she'd said. Emily smiled the entire time. She waved at strangers. She complimented decorations. She told jokes that didn't always make sense, but made people laugh anyway. Why did the snowman bring a broom? Because he heard the floor needed sweeping. The laughter echoed down the hall. For a moment, the hospital didn't feel so heavy. Emily stopped at almost every room. She didn't stay long, just long enough. "I like your socks. Your tree is pretty. Jesus loves you." Simple words, but spoken with certainty. Some patients smiled politely. Others cried the moment Emily rolled away. Grace noticed it too. Her daughter wasn't just surviving. She was ministering, without knowing the word for it. Then Emily reached room 214. The door was open. Inside sat a woman by the window. She looked young, but tired in a way that age couldn't explain. Her name was Sarah. Sarah hadn't decorated her room. No lights. No tinsel. No cards taped to the walls. Just a Bible sitting unopened on the table. Emily stopped. She stared for a moment longer than she had with anyone else. Grace noticed. "Do you want to say hello?" Emily nodded slowly. Emily rolled closer. She didn't smile right away. Instead, she asked gently, "Do you want company, or quiet?" Sarah looked surprised. After a long pause, she whispered, "Company." Emily smiled then, wide and warm. "Okay. I can do that." Grace stayed by the door. Something told her this moment mattered. Emily talked about small things. About the Christmas lights. About her favorite carol. About how heaven probably had the best Christmas trees. Sarah listened. For the first time in days, she didn't look out the window. She looked at Emily. Before leaving, Emily reached out and touched Sarah's hand. Her fingers were tiny, but steady. "I'll pray for you," Emily said. Sarah swallowed hard. "Thank you." That night, back in her room, Grace tucked Emily into bed. Emily was quiet, unusually quiet. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" Grace asked. Emily stared at the ceiling lights. "Mommy, do you think God lets people meet for a reason?" Grace didn't answer right away. She didn't trust her voice. "Yes," she finally said. "I do." Emily nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because I think he wants me to help Sarah." Grace's heart skipped. "Help her how?" Emily turned her head slowly and whispered something Grace would never forget. "Before I go." Grace felt the room spin. "Before you go where?" she asked softly. Emily closed her eyes. The heart monitor beeped steadily beside her. Christmas lights blinked outside the window. And in the quiet, Emily whispered, "Home." Christmas lights were still blinking when Emily woke up. Her heart monitor beeped slower than yesterday. And her mother noticed. She always noticed. "How are you feeling this morning?" she asked, brushing Emily's hair gently. She smiled and answered, "Like today matters." Her mother paused and then answered, "Every day matters, baby." Emily nodded her head and said, "Yes. But some days matter more." By late morning, Emily asked to go out again, but the nurses hesitated. They hesitated because her color wasn't great to move around for the day and her breathing was shallow. But when Emily looked up at them with those steady eyes, one nurse sighed softly and said, "Just for a little while." Her mother wrapped a blanket around her legs and pushed the wheelchair slowly. Christmas music floated down the hallway. Emily hummed along. She didn't stop at other rooms this time. She waved politely, smiled briefly, but she didn't linger. Her eyes were fixed ahead and her mother noticed it immediately and asked, "We're in a hurry today?" Emily answered, "Sarah might think I forgot her." Sarah was sitting exactly where Emily remembered her. By the window, hands folded, staring at falling snow outside. She didn't hear the wheelchair at first, until Emily spoke softly. "Hi." Sarah turned, and for the first time since she'd been admitted, she smiled first and said, "You came back." "I said I would." Emily grinned. Grace stayed near the door again. She felt like she was witnessing something sacred as she watched them talk about everything. Emily talked about her favorite Christmas movie. Sarah talked about how she used to love Christmas before hospitals. Emily listened carefully, then asked, "Do you still believe God is here?" Sarah looked away but answered, "I don't know. It doesn't feel like it." Emily tilted her head. "Sometimes God whispers instead of talks." Sarah laughed weakly. "I don't hear anything." Emily smiled gently and said, "That's okay. I hear enough for both of us." She reached out her hand to Sarah again, but Sarah hesitated, then took it. Emily closed her eyes. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet child talking to God like he was sitting right there. "Dear Jesus, thank you for snow and music and people who don't want to be alone. Please sit with Sarah when she feels tired. And if you need someone to stay with her later, please send an angel." Her mother standing at the door felt tears slide down her face. And Sarah's grip tightened. When Emily finished, she opened her eyes and said, "Amen." Sarah didn't speak. She was crying. Sarah couldn't tell them that she hadn't prayed in weeks. Not since the doctors said the word complications. Not since hope started slipping through her fingers. But when Emily prayed, it felt like God leaned closer. That afternoon, Emily slept longer than usual. Her mother sat quietly beside her bed, holding her hand. She noticed how small it felt. How light. The doctor came in quietly that afternoon, looked at charts, checked monitors. Then spoke softly. "Mrs. Collins, may I speak with you outside?" Grace nodded. She already knew. The hallway felt colder. The doctor's voice stayed calm. Professional. Gentle. "Emily's heart is getting weaker." Grace closed her eyes. "How much time?" she whispered. The doctor hesitated and that hesitation was the answer. "We don't know exactly. But we're close." Grace pressed her hand to her mouth. "She knows," the doctor added quietly. She looked up sharply. "No. She's just a child." The doctor shook his head slowly. "Children often know before adults do." Grace's knees nearly gave out. That evening, Grace sat beside Emily as snow fell outside the window. Emily watched it quietly. "Mommy?" Grace answered. "Yes, baby?" "You don't have to be scared." Her mother broke. She leaned over the bed, resting her forehead against Emily's. "I don't want to lose you." Emily reached up slowly and wiped her mother's tears. "You won't lose me," she whispered. "I'll just be somewhere you can't see yet." Later that night, when Grace slept in the chair, Emily whispered another prayer. This one was different. "Jesus, I know my heart is tired, but please help me stay long enough to finish what you gave me to do." The monitor beeped softly, almost like it was listening. Across the hall, Sarah couldn't sleep. Her chest felt heavy. Her thoughts darker. She stared at the unopened Bible. Then finally reached for it. She didn't read much. Just one verse. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." She whispered, "If you're close, please don't leave me." Christmas was 3 days away. The hospital was busier now, volunteers hung more decorations. Children practiced carols. Someone placed a small nativity scene near the nurse's station. Emily noticed everything. But she didn't ask to go out that morning. She looked tired. Grace sat beside her and asked, "Do you want to rest today?" Emily nodded. "Just for a little while." Then she added softly, "Sarah can come to me today." Grace's heart sank. Sarah walked into Emily's room slowly. She looked unsure, like she was afraid she might be interrupting something sacred. Emily smiled at her weakly. "You came." Sarah sat beside the bed. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Emily reached for Sarah's hand again, and whispered something that made Sarah's breath catch. "If I get to heaven first, I'll ask God to take extra care of you." Sarah shook her head, tears falling. "Emily, don't say that." Emily smiled softly. "Someone has to go first." Before Sarah left, Emily whispered one more thing. Something only Sarah heard. Something that changed everything. "I'm not scared anymore." Sarah nodded. But she was. That night, Emily's monitor alarm sounded briefly. Nurses rushed in. Her mother woke up gasping. The hallway filled with movement. And as Emily drifted back into sleep, she whispered one name. "Sarah." As Christmas drew closer, the hospital grew brighter. But Emily grew weaker. Christmas was almost here. You could feel it in the air. Not the joyful kind of feeling. The careful kind. The kind where everyone smiled a little longer. Because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't. By December 23rd, the hospital no longer looked like a hospital. Tinsel wrapped around handrails. Paper angels hung from the ceiling. A choir of volunteers rehearsed softly near the lobby, their voices echoing down long corridors. Some patients closed their eyes when they heard the singing. Others stared at the floor. Christmas had a way of reminding people of what they missed. And what they might lose. Emily noticed everything, even from her bed. She watched nurses tape ornaments to doors. She watched doctors pause for carols they pretended not to hear. She watched snow fall outside her window like it had somewhere better to be. Her mother sat beside her, brushing Emily's hair. "They're making it pretty," her mother said softly, and Emily nodded. "So people don't forget it's Christmas." Her mother smiled weakly and replied, "No one could forget." Emily didn't answer. Because some people tried. Morning came. Then afternoon. And for the first time since Emily arrived, she didn't ask to go into the hallway. Her mother noticed immediately and gently asked her, "Do you want to see the decorations today?" Emily smiled faintly and replied, "I can see them from here." Her mother's heart tightened. She knew what that meant. Later that afternoon, the doctor came in again. His voice stayed calm. But his eyes told the truth. "Emily's heart is working very hard," he said. "We need to limit her movement." Grace nodded slowly. She had expected this. Still, expecting pain didn't make it hurt less. "Can she still have visitors?" Grace asked. The doctor hesitated. "Yes. Short visits. Calm visits." Grace looked at Emily and Emily smiled. Sarah came later that day. She carried something small in her hands, a tiny wooden angel. "They were giving these out downstairs," she said softly, "and I thought maybe you'd like one." Emily's eyes lit up. "She's beautiful," Emily whispered. "What's her name?" Sarah smiled through tears and replied, "Hope." Emily nodded. "That's a good name." She held the angel close to her chest. Like it mattered. From that day on, things changed. Emily no longer went to the hallway. The hallway came to her. Nurses stopped by just to say hello. Volunteers brought hot chocolate she couldn't drink but loved to smell. A choir stood outside her door one afternoon and sang softly. Emily closed her eyes. Tears slipped out quietly. Her mother wiped them away. "Does it hurt?" she asked. Emily shook her head. "It feels like heaven practicing." That night, after Emily fell asleep, her mother stepped into the hallway again. The doctor was waiting. "She may not make it through Christmas," he said gently. Grace nodded. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She simply leaned against the wall and whispered, "Please let her feel peace." The doctor nodded. "She already does." Peace looked like Emily whispering prayers between naps. Peace looked like Emily smiling when Sarah entered the room. Peace looked like Emily asking questions that didn't sound like a child's. "Do you think heaven smells like Christmas?" she asked Sarah one afternoon. Sarah blinked. "Why Christmas?" Emily smiled. "Because Christmas smells like love." Sarah covered her mouth. One evening, Emily asked Sarah to pray out loud. Sarah froze. "I don't know if I remember how." Emily squeezed her hand. "Just talk." Sarah swallowed. Her voice trembled. "God, I don't understand why this is happening. But if you're here, please don't let her be afraid." Emily whispered, "Amen." And for the first time in weeks, Sarah felt like she wasn't praying alone. December 23rd faded into night. The hospital quieted. Emily's breathing grew shallow. Her mother stayed awake. She always stayed awake now. Emily opened her eyes suddenly and called out her mother. "Mommy." Her mother leaned forward instantly and answered, "I'm here." "If I fall asleep and don't wake up," Emily paused, "will you be okay?" Her mother broke, but she nodded anyway. "I will be." Emily smiled. "Good. Because Jesus will take care of me." Sarah came one last time that night and didn't want to leave. Emily noticed it and said to her, "You can go rest, I'll see you tomorrow." But Sarah hesitated. "You promise?" Emily nodded slowly. "I promise." But as Sarah walked out, Emily whispered to herself, "If there is a tomorrow." Snow fell heavier that night. Lights blinked brighter. The hospital felt like it was holding its breath. Grace held Emily's hand all night. And at one point, Emily squeezed back. Harder than she had all day. Her mother leaned closer and Emily whispered something so soft. And she almost missed it. "Mommy, it's almost time." Monitors beeped more frequently. Nurses stepped closer. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. And in the hospital, Christmas Eve was about to begin. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. No fireworks. No countdown. Just a soft shift in the air. Like the world knew something sacred was about to happen. Emily woke up before the sun. That alone surprised her mother. "You're awake early," she whispered, brushing Emily's hair gently. Emily smiled faintly and replied, "I didn't want to miss today." Her mother nodded and said, "You won't." Outside the window, snow rested on rooftops like folded prayers. Inside the room, a small Christmas light blinked beside Emily's bed. The hospital moved slower that day. Nurses spoke softer. Doctors lingered longer. Volunteers wore Santa hats that felt a little out of place, but no one complained. A small bell rang in the hallway every time someone donated a gift. Emily listened to everything happening carefully. "That bell sounds happy," she whispered. Her mother smiled through tears and replied, "It does." Emily nodded and said to her mother, "I like knowing people are being kind somewhere." By late morning, Emily was very tired. Talking took effort now. But she asked for something specific. "Can Sarah come early today?" she whispered. Her mother hesitated because she knew what this meant. "I'll go get her," she whispered. Sarah walked in quietly, like she was afraid to disturb something holy. Her eyes filled the moment she saw Emily. Emily looked smaller, paler, but her smile was still there. "You came," Emily whispered. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. She sat down and took Emily's hand immediately. Emily looked at Sarah carefully, like she was mimeizing her. "I need you to promise me something," Emily said softly. Sarah shook her head. "Don't." Emily squeezed her hand. "Please." Sarah swallowed hard. "Okay." Emily took a breath. It took effort. "When I'm gone, you can't stop loving people just because it hurts." Sarah broke. "I don't know how to do this without you." Emily smiled gently. "You don't have to do it alone. God will help you. Just like He helped me." Sarah nodded through tears. "I promise." Emily closed her eyes. She whispered slowly, Jesus, thank you for Sarah. Please hold her heart when mine gets too tired. And help her remember that Christmas is about love that stays. Sarah whispered, Amen. Her mother stood quietly at the foot of the bed, hands shaking. She had never seen faith like this. Not from a child. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled something out. A small knitted scarf, red and white. I made this for you, she said. I wanted to give it to you tomorrow. Emily touched it gently. It's beautiful, she whispered. But I think you should keep it. Sarah shook her head. No. Emily smiled and said to her, You'll need it when I'm not cold anymore. Sarah covered her teary face. Sarah stayed for hours. They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. When Emily finally slept off, Sarah prayed silently while Grace watched her daughter breathe. Each rise of her chest was a gift. As evening fell, the doctor came back. His face said everything. It may be tonight, he said gently. Grace nodded. She already knew. The hospital lights dimmed. Carols played softly over the speakers. Emily opened her eyes one last time that night. She looked at her mother, then Sarah. I love you, she whispered. Grace leaned down and kissed her forehead. Sarah squeezed her hand. And they chorused, We love you too. Emily smiled and whispered, That's enough. Christmas Day began quietly. Snow fell heavier. Lights glowed brighter. And Emily's breathing slowed. Her mother held her close while Sarah prayed. And just before the clock finished striking 12, Emily whispered one final sentence. I see him. The monitor beeped softly. Once. Twice. Then slowed. Christmas Day had begun. Christmas morning arrived without noise. No alarms. No announcements. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but full. The clock read 6:03 a.m. Snow covered the ground outside the hospital, untouched. Inside room 312, Grace sat frozen. Emily lay peacefully in her arms. Her face was calm. Her lips rested in a faint smile. The monitor beside the bed was quiet now. A nurse stood in the doorway with her head bowed. No one rushed. No one spoke. Because somehow, it felt like heaven had already entered the room. The doctor spoke softly. She's at peace. Grace didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She pressed her forehead against Emily's and whispered, Merry Christmas, my angel. Tears fell silently onto the blanket. Sarah stood near the window. She hadn't moved since midnight. When Grace turned to her, Sarah stepped forward slowly. She knelt beside the bed and took Emily's hand one last time. It was still warm. Thank you for staying, Sarah whispered. She placed the small wooden angel, Hope, beside Emily's pillow. Then she prayed. Out loud. For the first time in years. Word traveled quietly. Nurses stopped at the door. Doctors lingered longer than usual. Volunteers removed their Santa hats. Someone turned off the music in the hallway. Christmas slowed down. Not because joy had ended, but because something sacred had happened. Emily's drawings were still taped along the corridor. Crooked hearts. Stick figures holding hands. Misspelled words. Nurses stood reading them. Patients touched them gently. One whispered, She prayed for me. Another said, She told me not to be afraid. Later that morning, Sarah stepped into the hallway. She didn't know why. Her legs moved before her mind did. She walked past the rooms Emily used to stop at. Then she stopped. At the first door. A man sat inside, staring at the floor. Sarah suddenly remembered Emily's words. You can't stop loving people just because it hurts. Then she knocked softly and asked the man, Do you want company or quiet? The man looked up, surprised, and answered, Company. Sarah sat and stayed. In the chapel, candles were lit. Grace sat in the front row, holding Emily's red cardigan. She didn't feel alone. Not completely. She felt surrounded. By prayers. By memories. By something eternal. The pastor spoke gently. Christmas is not about what we lose, but who came to stay. Grace closed her eyes. And believed it. Later that day, a nurse handed Grace an envelope. Emily's handwriting. Shaky. Small. Inside was a letter. Mommy, if you're reading this, I'm okay. Please don't be sad too long. Tell Sarah to keep her promise. And remember, Jesus was born for days like this. Grace held the letter to her chest and cried out loudly. That afternoon, something unusual happened. Patients began gathering near the Christmas tree in the lobby. Someone started singing. Silent Night. Others joined in. Voices cracked. Tears fell. But the song continued. Grace stood quietly at the edge. Sarah stood beside her. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Emily had already said everything. Before the day ended, a small sign appeared near the children's ward. It read, Emily's Corner, where prayers are welcome and no one sits alone. A nurse placed the wooden angel there. Hope. As Christmas night fell, Sarah sat alone in the chapel. She opened her Bible again and whispered, Okay, God, I'm ready. Emily was gone, but somehow she was everywhere. Christmas night didn't end when the lights dimmed. It lingered, like a song that refused to fade. The hospital grew quieter after sunset. Visitors left slowly. Volunteers packed away gift bags. The choir folded their music sheets and whispered goodbyes. But in the chapel, one person remained. It was Sarah. She sat alone in the last pew, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The wooden angel, Hope, rested beside her. She stared at the cross, then whispered, I don't know how to do this, but I said I would. Her voice cracked. So please, help me keep my promise. And for the first time, Sarah didn't feel like her words disappeared into the ceiling. The next morning, still Christmas, Sarah didn't go home. She didn't know why. She just stayed. She walked the halls slowly, past rooms she'd avoided for weeks. Everywhere she went, she saw signs of Emily. A nurse wearing a paper snowflake Emily had given her. A child holding one of Emily's drawings. A volunteer whispering a prayer beside a bed. Emily was gone. But her presence felt louder than ever. In room 312, Grace packed quietly. Each movement felt unreal. Emily's blanket. Emily's cardigan. Emily's tiny socks. She folded them carefully. Not because she had to. Because it felt like honoring something holy. A nurse knocked gently. Take your time, she said softly. But Grace wasn't even ready to leave the room where her daughter had met heaven. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Grace looked up and it was Sarah. She stood there, uncertain. I just wanted to check on you, Sarah said quietly. Grace studied her for a long moment. Then opened her arms. Sarah stepped into them, surprised. They held each other and cried. Two strangers, bound by one small girl. As the day passed, something remarkable happened. Patients started asking for prayer. Not loudly. Not formally. Just quietly. Could you sit with me? Could you pray like that little girl did? Sarah said yes every time. Her voice shook. Her words weren't perfect. But they were honest. And that was enough. That night, snow fell again. The decorations stayed up. Christmas refused to leave. Sarah sat beside a young boy who couldn't sleep. She told him about Emily. She said heaven has the best Christmas lights, Sarah told the boy. The boy smiled and slept. The next morning, Grace stood in the hallway one last time. She stopped at Emily's corner. She placed a new drawing on the wall. It read, Love doesn't stop. Thank you for letting her stay. Then she walked away. Days passed. But Christmas still lingered. The trees stayed lit. The carols played softly. And Sarah realized something. She wasn't counting the days anymore. She wasn't afraid of silence. Because silence now felt full. One evening, she spoke to a nurse. Do you need volunteers? The nurse smiled gently. We always do. Sarah said to her, I'd like to stay. Sarah kept Emily's promise. She sat with the lonely. She prayed with the afraid. She stayed when it hurt. And every time it felt too heavy, she remembered Emily's voice. Love is easier when God helps. On the final night before decorations would come down, Sarah returned to the chapel. She lit a candle. And whispered, She trusted you with me. So I'll trust you too. The candle flickered steady. As Sarah stood to leave, she noticed something new on the chapel board. A handwritten note. in a child's handwriting. "If you're lonely, sit here. God will meet you." Sarah smiled through tears, because she knew exactly who had inspired it. Christmas didn't end when the decorations came down. It never does. The day after the hospital removed the tree, the lobby felt strangely empty. No lights, no ribbons, no carols. Yet somehow, it felt fuller than before. Because what Christmas had started, it hadn't finished yet. Emily's corner didn't stay small. At first, it was just a chair, a wooden angel, a few drawings taped to the wall. Then people started adding to it. A handwritten prayer, a thank you note, a small Bible verse folded carefully and pinned in place. Nurses stopped there before shifts. Parents sat there after bad news. Patients waited there when they didn't want to be alone. No one planned it. It just happened. Sarah came every day now. Not because she had to, but because she couldn't imagine not coming. She learned names, learned stories, learned how to sit in silence without trying to fix anything. She prayed when asked. She listened when words failed. And when people asked why she kept showing up, she always said the same thing. Someone once stayed with me when she didn't have much time. One afternoon, weeks later, Grace came back to the hospital. She stood quietly in the hallway, watching Sarah hold a woman's hand, watching a nurse smile through tears, watching strangers comfort one another. Grace felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. She stepped forward. Sarah looked up and froze. Then they smiled. No words were needed. That night, Grace wrote a letter. She didn't know who it was for. Maybe Emily. Maybe God. Maybe herself. "I thought losing her would break me. But somehow, her love stayed. It's in this place. In these people. In the way Christmas still feels holy." She folded the letter and placed it at Emily's corner. Months passed. But every December, something special happened. On the first day Christmas decorations went up, someone always placed a small wooden angel back on the table. Hope. No one ever admitted to doing it. But it always appeared. One evening, Sarah sat alone in the chapel again. Just like she had on Christmas night. But this time, she wasn't afraid. And she whispered, "I get it now." Christmas wasn't about perfect moments. It wasn't about miracles that fixed everything. It was about God choosing to stay, even when hearts were tired. Somewhere, a nurse told a new patient, "If you're scared, go sit by Emily's corner." A child asked, "Who was Emily?" And the nurse smiled. She was a little girl with a very big heart, who taught us how to love like Jesus. Emily didn't make it to Christmas dinner. She didn't open presents. She didn't grow up. But she did something far greater. She showed everyone what Christmas was really for. It was about how much we love others, even when our heart feels tired and slow. And maybe that's the real miracle of Christmas. Not that pain disappears. Not that every prayer ends the way we hope. But that love chooses to stay. Emily's heart may have been fragile, but what she planted in that hospital was stronger than sickness. Stronger than fear. Stronger than goodbye. Long after the lights came down. Long after the carols faded. Her kindness kept echoing through the halls. Because when God wants to remind the world what Christmas means, He doesn't always send a miracle. Sometimes, He sends a child. As this story ends, I want to leave you with a simple Christmas prayer. May you be someone's comfort this season. May your love be louder than your fears. And may you never underestimate the impact of love. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share, so these stories can keep finding the people who need them most. And before you go, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from, because no matter where we are in the world, love speaks the same language. Merry Christmas, and thank you for being part of SoulStir Stories.